Welcome back to Higher Self Mastery. I'm your host, Erika. Thank you for being here with us today. So, in the last episode, I talked about what is the higher self and how to master it. And I mentioned that it would be helpful if we see the higher self as a subpersonality within ourselves. And so I thought it was appropriate to talk about subpersonalities today because I'm aware that not everyone knows what a subpersonality is. So, from a psychology standpoint, a subpersonality is also known as a split in consciousness or fragmentation. Okay. So the way that happens is like this. Let's talk about trauma for a moment. So, trauma is a spectrum. Okay. Trauma is not just sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse. Trauma is a wide spectrum, especially if you were or are an empath or a highly sensitive or a very sensitive child. What you consider to be traumatic might not be traumatic to someone else. Okay? So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that your mom would yell at you. Maybe to someone else that would not have been harmful or as traumatic, but to you as a highly sensitive or as an empath, you could really feel your mother's anger or whatever it was that she was going through. And because as a child, we don't have the ability to assess correctly what's happening. We don't understand that mom is going through her own challenges. We, as a child, make it mean that there's something wrong with us, right? And so being yelled at by your mom to clean your room might have been traumatizing for you. Really, it's important to see trauma as distress, okay? Trauma is really just distress. Now, in order for trauma to be considered traumatic and to like hold its charge, there's three specific components. The first one is that it was something that was unexpected. The second is that it was something that was undesirable. And the third is that it really affected you or your life in a negative way. So all three of these aspects must be held in place in order for trauma to remain traumatic and hold its charge over you and in your life. Well, in my seminar, Higher Self Mastery, we go into this deeply and we start to loosen the third component so that this energy could finally be released and we could finally receive the gift that this experience came to bless us with. And that's for another episode. So let's get back to distress, trauma, and subpersonalities. So let me give you an example. Let's say that John is a very sensitive kid, right? Maybe he's very in touch with his emotions. He really loves animals. He's a gentle spirit. Or let's say that Michael is a jokester and he's playful and he's silly, right? Okay, two different examples. Now let's say their father was in his wounded masculine, disconnected from his inner child, which is really what represents our playfulness, our imagination. So let's say that the father was disconnected from his emotions. Let's say that he was programmed to believe that men don't cry, things of that nature. So the father, let's say with John, when John would cry, would tell John, suck it up, be a man, or I'll give you something to cry about, or that kind of thing. Or let's say that with Michael, when he was being silly and being a jokester, he would say, you need to stop messing around. I need you to go and throw out the trash and, stop doing that, whatever it is. In this moment, the child learns that who they authentically are is not acceptable. The most distressing thing to a child is to feel that they are losing the love, also known as validation or approval, of their caretakers. By nature, we seek connection, we avoid rejection. And remember that children do not have the capacity to understand that dad is the way he is because of his trauma and his programming, or mom is the way she is because, she was raised a particular way, or she's dealing with her things, or she's wounded. So the child will always internalize everything and make everything mean that there's something wrong with them. And then this becomes a belief. And this is why the most common wound I see in my practice is the worthiness wound. It's like everyone that I've ever worked with, which has been hundreds of people, deep, deep inside, they don't believe they're good enough. They don't believe they're worthy enough. And that's why they settle in relationships, settle with the money they make, with their jobs, with their body, with their house. They settle for the scraps. Why? Because deep inside, there's a belief, a core belief that says, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy of love. And that is the dysfunction of humanity. That is the sickness, the illness, the disease of humanity. Because most of us, actually, really all of us, I think, have never experienced what it is to be truly unconditionally loved. Unless you have a dog. If you have a dog, which mine just had surgery, she's right here. If you have a dog, you know what it is to be truly unconditionally loved. But other than that, you don't. Why? Because our parents, as well-meaning as many of them were never unconditionally loved. Most of us learned that love is performance-based. And we felt the conditions of our parents' love almost immediately. We would see that when we behaved a certain way, did what they told us to do, we would receive their approval. We would receive their validation, their praise. But if we made a mistake, if we broke something, if we, something along those lines, brought home a bad grade, so on and so forth, we could feel the conditions of their love, almost as if, especially if you had authoritarian parents that were, constantly making you feel like you're the child and they're the parent and you have to do what they say and believe them punishment, maybe even physical abuse, things of that nature, then you would believe that you are only worthy of love, worthy of all that's good, when you behave a certain way. Okay? So we grow up believing that our self-worth is condition-based, and that love is condition-based, performance-based. And we feel that right away. And so that's the real dysfunction in humanity, in society, in this world, that no one knows what it is to feel truly unconditionally loved. And so we don't know how to truly unconditionally love ourselves. And I think we're all here on this earth, on this planet, to learn exactly that, how to truly love ourselves unconditionally. And when we talk about the higher self, it's become such a popular term that, like I mentioned in the last episode, people assume that the higher self is the best behaved version of you, or the most successful, or whatever that means. But really, the higher self is the self that can hold all the parts of you. It's the part of you that is connected to pure unconditional love. It's neutral. And so healing is not about becoming the best version. It's about loving the wounded versions of you, the wounded aspects of you. Can you hold space for your shadow? It is the love that is the medicine. So back to the subpersonalities. So let's say that John and Michael, so like I said, Michael's playful and silly. John, he is sensitive and emotional, and that triggers dad. And so dad reacts and tells John, he really needs to stop being so sensitive. He needs to man up. He needs to suck it up. Or he tells Michael, you need to stop being so playful. In life, you need to work hard. What's going to happen in that moment is that John and Michael, they're going to create a split in their consciousness, also known as fragmentation. So who they authentically are, let's say Michael authentically is silly and playful and the jokester archetype. If you know Carl Jung's work, he's the jokester archetype. But that's not acceptable. So he needs to repress that side of himself in order to be loved, in order to be safe. Because remember, the most unsafe thing to a child is to experience the loss of love from their caretakers and their tribe. So in that moment, Michael will create a subpersonality. The same thing the subpersonality is the same thing as a mask. So authentically, I'm playful and silly, but that's not acceptable. So I'm going to put on a mask. I'm going to put on a mask so that I'm safe. And this mask is going to be whatever the child believes will keep them safest in their reality. So let's say that dad wants him to be more serious. Well, he's going to create a mask that's more serious. And it can go many ways, okay? He can create a mask, aka a persona, a subpersonality that's rebellious. He can create one that shuts down, that shows no emotion whatsoever. He can create one that's hyper autonomous, super independent. He can create whatever he feels will keep him safe. And the same thing goes for John. If John is super sensitive, but that's not safe because he gets yelled at, he gets rejected by dad or by mom or by tribe, then he's going to create a mask in that moment as well. And that mask could be someone who's totally disconnected from their emotions, right? And so usually when I do subpersonality work with someone, with a client, and I have a whole set of questions, I call this the subpersonality eval. And the reason why this is so powerful is because we begin to externalize what we're completely identified with. So we stop being identified with it. And then that path brings us home to truth, home to our authentic self and to our authentic nature. And so another dysfunction in humanity is that most of us don't even know who we are. We don't even know what we want. We're so disconnected from ourselves that in turn gets projected outward and we become disconnected from each other. But what's happening is that we're really disconnected from ourselves. We have so many masks, and in psychology, on average, a person has a minimum of 12 subpersonalities within themselves. This is why sometimes you're confused. You ever notice that sometimes you don't know what to do because you have one voice telling you this and you have another voice telling you something else? Sometimes you have several voices telling you something else. No, you should do that. No, you should do this. How about you do this and then you do that? Maybe it's better that you just don't do that at all and you just leave it alone, right? And so it's like, wow, I have all of these subpersonalities. I have all of these different aspects of myself in conflict. And a person in conflict within themselves has conflict in their world, in their reality. If you want to know why you're fighting with your family, why you're fighting in your relationship, why you can't get along with your coworkers, it's simply a reflection of your internal world. And I know that's deep, but this is higher self mastery. Okay, we're not here to sugarcoat things. We're here to master who we really are, our authentic self. And so, in order to create peace in the world, peace in your family, peace in your home, you need to first create peace within yourself. And the way that you begin to create peace within yourself is by realizing all of the parts of you that you've created along the way, all of the subpersonalities that take over your consciousness that are conditioned. They're not even you. They're not even anywhere close to your authentic self. As a matter of fact, at the end of the subpersonality work that I do with the client, the session, and it's like 33 questions, I ask, and what is the complete opposite essence of this persona? So let's say that I'm working with a client that is aggressive, okay, very aggressive, or has a lot of violent thoughts, or is very combative, something like that. I do not treat him as if he is combative or he is having violent thoughts. I see that he created a subpersonality along the way to keep him safe that is aggressive, that is combative. But it's not who he really is. And how do I know that? Because who we really are is love. That's why we seek it, desire it, want it, crave it. That's why the only time we feel really alive is when we're connected, when we feel love, when we feel the presence of love. So that persona is so disconnected from the truth, from his higher self, from who he really authentically is, that I know it's not who he is. So just this is so healing. And it's the same thing if I get someone who's super anxious or super depressed. No, I have depression. I'm super depressed. No, this is a conditioned pattern. This is a subpersonality. You have a subpersonality within you that is depressed, and we'll call her the depressed one, or the anxious one, or the insecure one, or the overeater, or the alcoholic, or the BITCH, right? They are subpersonalities. And if you completely identify with them, then you will be powerless to them. Because the way the subpersonalities live is if you feed them. It's like that tale of, I think it's like a Native American tale, that there are two wolves, a white wolf and a black wolf. And the child asked, or whoever was in the tribe asked, there's these two wolves within me. There's this dark wolf, this black wolf that, seeks separation or is afraid or whatever it is. And then there's this white wolf that is like light, represents light and love and oneness. And he asks the chief, which one wins? And the chief said, you know it, the one you feed the most. Well, this is the way subpersonality work is. What feeds our subpersonality is our thoughts, our words, and the steroid to the subpersonality is behavior. If you have an alcoholic subpersonality, or let's say a cheating subpersonality, like you can't be faithful in relationships, or a codependent subpersonality, and you pick up that drink, or you text that girl back, or you get what I'm saying? That behavior feeds that subpersonality. And the more that you feed it with your behavior, that basically you act out what it's telling you to do, the larger and the larger and the larger and the stronger and the more autonomous it becomes. And some of us have been feeding subpersonalities since we were 4. So if we want to start to disidentify with the aspects of us that are creating chaos, that are creating disharmony, that are creating madness in our life, suffering in our life, we need to stop feeding it. We need to stop acting on what it's telling us to do. That is the first step, really. I mean, the first step really is getting clear on your subpersonalities. And you can get a pen and a paper like today, now, or tonight, or whenever, and you write down, notice all of the extremes within your personality, like all of the polarity, all of the dichotomy. So it's like, I'm super confident and I'm super insecure. I'm super sensitive and I'm heartless. I'm super loving and kind, and then I could be like really cold. I'm like very generous, and then I could be like really stingy. Like, notice, right? Notice I'm super health conscious, but I get drunk and I black out, right? And so it's like, okay, notice these extremes, because these extremes are subpersonalities. These extremes are your subpersonalities. And so the first step is really becoming aware of them. So I have counted 33 subpersonalities within myself. I have clients that have many more, because depending on how much trauma you experience, which I experienced a lot of trauma, okay, will determine how many subpersonalities you have. So sit down and write it down. The addict, the alcoholic, um, you know, everything that you get. And I'm not even talking about the archetypes, because, like Carl Jung's archetypes, the caretaker, the jokester, the sensitive, the sage, those are like good, right? Like good aspects of our personality. But these subpersonalities are rooted in fear. And so back to my point that at the end of the subpersonality work, I ask, what is the opposite of this essence? What is the opposite energetic imprint of this subpersonality? And the complete opposite is usually, or actually every single time, the complete opposite is who they are really, authentically. And this subpersonality has just been a mask they've been using to cover the opposite, which is who they are. So if they're really serious, most likely they're actually really playful and really like silly. And if they're super aggressive, like back to the example of, the client that I work with that say that he's aggressive, he's actually really sensitive. He's actually really gentle, but he wasn't allowed to be. Maybe he was abused. Maybe he needed to create this monster, this aggressor, to keep him safe. Which, by the way, remember, all of our subpersonalities, we created them at one point or another to keep us safe. And so it's not about condemning our subpersonality. Like, one of the subpersonalities that I did so much work with was the seductress. And the seductress came online when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, very hypersexual, because I was molested as a child. And so I normalized abuse. I created a belief that abuse was love, and that in order for me to be valuable, you had to use me. And that part of my value was my sexuality. It's the way that I received love, or was more worthy of love. And so when we experience sexual abuse, most often than not, and I see this a lot in my practice, most of the time, the child will create a subpersonality that is like a sexual deviancy in a sense. It's like the child has fantasies, or I'm sorry, the adult has fantasies about being raped, or about, really aggressive sex, or, the guy might have thoughts about doing things, or may have an addiction to porn and watch certain things. And this gets very dark, right? Like, I don't want to go down too much this path, but it's very common because what happens is that if I create a subpersonality that is like the sexual deviant, then I like it. I'm doing it to myself. And if I like being abused, being exploited, if I like this sexual corruption, then I'm safe because I'm the one creating it and I'm the one doing it to myself. So this is why a lot of people that experience abuse in any form, but especially sexual abuse, become sexual abusers, because there's a fragmentation, there's a split in their consciousness at the time of their abuse, where there's the child who feels something is wrong and they're not safe, and then the split in the consciousness of, oh, but I like this, or whichever way that split occurs, whatever subpersonality they create, they can create a subpersonality that disassociates, like completely disassociates. And now as an adult, whenever something is wrong, they just don't acknowledge it, right? Or they can create, like I said, the sexual deviancy, which is the part of them that says, oh, okay, but I like this. And then if they feed that subpersonality becomes a full-blown abuser later on. And so I know that I said I wanted to keep this podcast. This is my second episode under 30 minutes. I'm 26 minutes in, almost 27 minutes in. So I'm going to try to wrap it up here because this is a big topic. If you come to my seminar, we do subpersonality work. And it's amazing to witness because I do a live demonstration. It really, truly is amazing to witness how a subpersonality has a complete separate agenda, a complete different set of belief systems. I mean, it's a completely different person inside of you. And so back to what I was saying with, the opposite of it is the authentic self. And so the healing work is in, once you understand at the end of the subpersonality work, when you say, okay, what do you want, subpersonality? What are you afraid of, subpersonality? What do you need? You begin to notice that the subpersonality is a child, because a child created the mask, the persona. So underneath that subpersonality is a wounded child. And when you offer unconditional love to that wounded child, to that subpersonality, so for me, a lot of work that I did was with the seductress, with the subpersonality who wanted to be exploited, who used her sexuality to manipulate, to gain this validation, to gain this approval. And she believed, because I did a lot of work with her, that abuse was love. And she believed that desire was love. And it wasn't. But she kept attracting partner after partner, looking for her father, really, because my father is the one who molested me, looking for her father in every man, trying to convince him that if she's desirable enough, then maybe he will love her. If she gives himself enough, if she allows herself to be abused enough, exploited enough, if she's sexy enough, maybe he will, what? Want her. Like, my father left when I was 1. He never wanted me, and I had 5 stepfathers. So I experienced this abandonment wound many times. And what did I want? To be wanted, right? And so another thing is our subpersonalities usually tag team, because when the split in the consciousness occurs, so pretend like this is a mirror, right? And then the split happens, the trauma happens and splits the consciousness. There can be several splits, like a cracked mirror at once. Okay. So for me, I had to teach the little girl who was the seductor subpersonality that abuse is not love. The desire is not love. And I remember one day I was walking into Home Depot, and when I was walking into Home Depot, I could feel that my body started to shift. And this is something to pay attention to. Remember that the first step in healing the subpersonality is awareness, becoming aware that they even exist, naming them so that you're not identified with them. I'm not depressed. I'm not, a sexual deviant. I am not a rageaholic. I am not a liar. I am not. There's a subpersonality within me that is, because at some point in my life, it kept me safe. So when you could externalize that and disidentify with it, then now you have the power to heal it. Okay. And you don't make it mean that there's something wrong with you, which is really important in healing. But anyway, so pay attention to the way your breathing changes, the way your body changes. Physiologically, like what you notice when a subpersonality is taking over. And I noticed that when my seductress was taking over, my chest would come out, my stomach would go in, I would flip my hair, and like my posture would change, and I can notice that she was taking over, and she needed to be seen. She needed for the men in the area to be attracted to her, to desire her. And so when I would notice that she was shifting my body, I would go, and I would relax, and I would say, "Hi, seductress." And you can hear them in your mind. "Hi, little girl." And I would say, "What are you doing?" She would say, "Nothing." I go, "Come on, what are you doing?" She would say, "Nothing. I just want attention, or I just want to feel desired, or I just want love," or whatever it is. And I would say, "Okay, I understand that. But remember that." And this is when you insert the new truth. This is when you teach them, just like if you had a child, okay? You say, "Remember that desire is not love. Any one of these men here in Home Depot, they might take you to the car and sleep with you. But if you were in the hospital tonight, it doesn't mean they're going to come and visit you. It doesn't mean they care if you eat. It doesn't mean that they love you just because they desire you. Desire is not love. But you know what? I love you. I love you. I desire you. I want you. I'm here for you. And I'll never go away. You can count on me. I love you." And I would like give her a hug in my mind's eye. This is with me literally walking through Home Depot. This is just a practical example of my own life. And in that moment, you'll hear them. Like you can feel or see, however you are, if you're visual or if you're audio, you can hear something, or you can see them hug you, or you can see them distance themselves. And it's very personal. It's very different for each person because we're all so different. But like in this situation, for example, I told her, "You know who does desire you? Your husband." And she said, "No, he doesn't." And I go, "Really? Why is that?" And this is the thing, you have to become very curious. And she said, "Because he doesn't want me." And the reason why she said that was because I had just had a baby. My husband and I, we were not, as intimate as we were before during this time. And she was making that mean that she was not loved. So you see how important this work is? In that moment, I had to tell her, "Okay, I understand. Valid. I understand." And we have to validate the subpersonality. We have to understand them for them to begin to be healed, integrated. Okay. And I said, "Okay, I understand. But you know that you just had a baby, right? We just had a baby, and things are different. Just because you and your husband don't have sex every day, it doesn't mean that he doesn't love you. Because remember that love is unconditional. And love believes for the best. And love is supportive. It's not just about the sex. Remember that sex is not love. Remember that desire is not love. But you know what? You know who loves you? I love you. And I always go back to that. I would always go back to, I love you. I want you. If you feel lonely, you have a lonely subpersonality, she's always alone. You need to tell that little girl, to tell that little boy, that persona, remember that you could be in a room filled with people and feel alone. Because this loneliness is really just an experience that you had in your childhood. But that's not happening anymore. You're not alone anymore because I am here with you now. I am here with you now. I will never leave you. I will never leave you alone. I'm here to keep you company. Let's go watch a movie together. Let's go out to eat together. Let's go on a walk together, you and me. And you start loving the lonely one. Do you understand? Do you get it? So if you're interested in this work, come to my seminar, Higher Self Mastery, in October. I'll tell you exactly the date. Let me look at the calendar. It's in Miami. It's going to be 3 days, deeply transformative, the most important work that you will ever do. Do you hear me? The most important work you will ever do in your life. It's very rare that you get 3 full days to go all in on yourself, on your trauma, on your stories, on your subpersonalities, and do this work. Okay? It will be October 25th, Friday the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th in Miami, a beautiful little hip hotel here in Miami. I hope to see you there. And thank you so much. I know this episode went a little bit over. If you stayed all the way, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. And thank you for being a part of this collective, a part of this community. I see you. God bless you.